If you subscribe to this channel, if you watch my videos regularly, I can probably guess that your favorite kind of movie is horror movies. But today, down in the comments, I want to hear what your second favorite genre of movies is. Hello, I'm Adam Caesar. This is Project Black T-shirt, the channel where usually we take a horror movie or horror movies, review it, and then pair it with a reading recommendation or a book recommendation that you'll like. If you like those movies, I am the author of Clown in a Cornfield and several other horror novels. This was recently nominated for the Bram Stoker Award. Clive Barker called me an author who knows how to make us afraid. That is high praise. If you've read this, or if you've read any of my other books, or if you've listened to the audiobooks, or if you've bought the ebooks, told your friends, reviewed them, thank you so much. It helped me keep this channel going. And today we are talking about crime movies, but these are two crime movies that have significant connective tissue to the horror world. They are Jack Hill's eternal classic, The Switchblade Sisters, a gang movie from 1975. And then also from 1975, we're going to be talking about the not quite as well known, not quite as lauded, maybe for a good reason, maybe not, Silent Action, which is directed by Sergio Martino, our man Sergio Martino, who we talk about a lot on this channel. I'll put up cards in the corners over here to link to other Martino videos, especially talking about his giallo films. But first, let's talk about Switchblade Sisters. This is out through Arrow Films. This is just recently out, maybe even last week as I'm filming this video. Arrow has done a lot of Jack Hill movies. They did The Swinging Cheerleaders. They did some of his collaborations with Roger Corman when they did their release of Bloodbath, which had all the different editions of that movie, all the different edits and cuts of that movie, including the Stephanie Rothman one, including the Jack Hill one. They put out Spider Baby, which is probably Jack Hill's most well-known movie outside of Switchblade Sisters. Spider Baby is one of my favorite films. But a director that worked in a number of different genres, a director that worked, kind of got his start in the Corman school of exploitation film, but then branched out to get more independent than Corman, which he talks about a little bit on the features of Switchblade Sisters. But this is a movie that I really love. The new art. The new art I've seen people online talk about, maybe this is a little bit of an acquired taste, but the original around, and we get a little bit more familiar image, that gorgeous poster art. This is notable for being one of Tarantino's favorite grindhouse movies or exploitation movies, and he even did a release of this himself. That's how I became familiar with this film, was the earlier days of DVDs. I think it's probably 15 years now at this point, or maybe even 20 years. He had released this movie on DVD and had a little picture of Tarantino in the corner. There's been a long time since I've seen The Switchblade Sisters, or The Jezebels as it was originally titled. A movie that it not only held up to my memory of it, was even a lot better than my memory of it. And maybe that's the Arrow presentation of it, or maybe that's me just growing older and growing wiser and enjoying movies more. But God, what an awesome movie. This starts out as a fairly prototypical gang movie, and then it gets kind of weirder and bigger as it goes. But it starts out, we are following a gang, this girl gang that's a kind of subsidiary. They're the Dagger Debs. They're a subsidiary of the big male gang in the area. And the Silver Daggers, Dagger Debs, are kind of subordinate to them. We follow the leader of the Dagger Debs, who's played by Robbie Lee. She's really great. And right early in the movie, they meet Robbie Lee's kind of foil, who is played by Joni Nail. While there is kind of turmoil within the Dagger Debs, we know that we see that the Silver Daggers themselves are in real trouble because they're in a all-out gang war with this new gang that has been recently added to their school, that runs out of a political elections office. Very interesting political stuff going on in this movie, being the 70s and being that one of the gangs is this weird kind of yuppie commie amalgam. While all that's going on, things progress, and eventually the Dagger Debs become the Jezebels, which was the original title and more apt title of this movie, even though the Switchblade Sisters, pretty good title. But they become the Jezebels, and then there's even more power struggles, and it all gets very Shakespearean by the end. Something that Jack Hill notes in the special features, he talks about this in relation to Othello, when I was first watching it, the Othello thing kind of works because we have this one Iago type character, Patch, who's always whispering in Robbie Lee's ear. But it doesn't map exactly onto that, but it feels heightened, it feels big, it feels Shakespearean. And a big part of that heightenedness, Walter Hill always talks about The Warriors, which is another big street gang movie, kind of the biggest street gang movie. He talks about how when he originally made that, he saw that as being like a comic book. And in his director's cut, he added all those like comic book panel transitions and stuff like that. But clearly The Warriors is in a heightened reality. But Switchblade Sisters is pretty close to being there as well, which is something that stood out to me on this viewing. Maybe I didn't quite catch in high school, but it's a very heightened reality, and it's really aided by, there's a couple of real locations used. There's some location shooting kind of around LA. There's this great scene where there's a shootout in a roller rink, which is awesome. There's one or two street scenes, and then most of this movie, like this is a kind of set-bound movie, but it doesn't feel, not in a bad way, it doesn't feel overly stagey, but it feels very designed. Like there's a lot of sets in this movie. They use a lot of sets, and because of that, it feels like Hill has way more control over the types of locations he wants to use, over the types of stories he wants to tell. And it gives it that semi-dystopian, it's such a crappy world that these characters live in, semi-dystopian, semi-comic booky, very exaggerated reality that these characters live in. And it's a lot to do with shooting on sets and how these sets are built. But it really, with this new transfer and with the ability to be like, that's clearly a set, I think the movie's boosted by it. It's not held back by it. Yeah, the performances, the characters in this, the just insane places that it goes, because it like I said, it starts out as your typical gang movie, gets more and more exaggerated, until at the end we have characters with big machine guns running down the streets of like the WB backlot with tanks and stuff like that, and like a full-on kind of revolutionary war being fought between these 2 or 3 gangs. It goes huge places, and it's really a crowd pleaser, and just a fantastic movie, and a really fantastic addition to this movie, because I missed 1 or 2 releases since that DVD, because a lot of the special features on here are holdovers from some kind of release that came out in 2016. Maybe it was a British release, maybe it never came out here, or I missed it for some other reason. But if you haven't seen them, they're new to you. There's a very significant making of feature that has a lot of involvement from, I guess the main person missing is Robbie Lee from that one, but she shows up in some of the other archival features. Jack Hill talks ad nauseum. He's a really interesting and compelling figure to watch talk about movies. Great documentaries on here. There's a location one with Elijah Drenner where they're going all around LA trying to find the stuff that exists, because some of the school scenes are exteriors are filmed or inspired by Jack Hill's actual high school where he went, and all this fun stuff. But it's a fantastic set. They really did a good job on this. My highest recommendation, if you're at all interested in these kinds of movies, I feel like you probably already bought this. But this is a great one. I'll put the links down in the description, as I do with everything, to where you can get this. But this is a great movie and a very, very nice presentation of it. Usually I have stuff to hold up. Usually I have discs. Usually I have movies to hold up. But our next movie was kindly sent to me by Fractured Visions, which is a new label out of the UK. They had asked me, do you want to review this movie? Silent action? I don't know. I'm not super big into Italian crime movies. I haven't seen a whole ton of the poliziotteschi, or however you say it, the Polizzi movies. I haven't seen a ton of them. But they were like, it's directed by Sergio Martino. And I was like, you know what? I've talked a lot. It's probably the filmmaker we've talked about the most on this channel, just from different releases of his horror pictures. So I was like, yes, definitely send it along. Because of postage from the UK, they send me check discs. Usually I can open the disc up and show you like slipcover and all that different stuff. Just assume that that's probably good, because the contents of these check discs are very good. There's a regular Blu-ray and the CD soundtrack. Silent Action, as I said, is a Italian crime, Italian police movie, but just that very specific subgenre that kind of coexisted with the giallo and shared a lot of talent back and forth. But these were movies made at a very politically charged and a very politically uneven time in Italy, kind of post-war, post-economic boom that came after the war, and leading into this very violent, there were like a lot of bombings, a lot of political assassinations, a series of years called the Years of Leeds. And if that sounds like it's not important, we open up on a montage of assassinations, of political assassinations that are made to look like accidents and like freak accidents and like, why did these people die? But there's like a guy that gets drugged and then run over by, they lay him on the train tracks and he gets run over by a train. There's all these different, there's a guy that like, they shoot him, but they make it look like suicide by his own hand. It's all this, and then you get dates and you get headlines, and you start to piece together that there's these politically motivated killings going on. And then we meet our investigator, played by Luke Merida, who's in a ton of Italian movies. You will definitely recognize him, very distinctive face. And then, like a lot of Italian films, you have an American actor thrown in there kind of for name value, where it's Mel Farah here. He's not in it a ton, but he plays the DA, who's this rogue cop. He's not even rogue. He just doesn't want to take the easy way out and close this case and be like, oh, we found circumstantial evidence that leads us to believe it was this woman. Lock her up, throw away the key, case closed, we can move on. Which is the DA really kind of wants him to do, but he keeps pushing and he keeps pulling at all these different threads. And we get, for a good 30-minute chunk of the movie, we get just those procedural elements where he's showing up to different people's apartments, different houses. He shows up at a brothel at one point, and he's just pulling at threads and trying to figure out why this guy, he's on one of these cases, why he was bludgeoned to death, and what he had to hide. And there was a room in his house where he was bugged, or where he was making recordings and he was blackmailing people. And it's all like very kind of convoluted, very, if you're familiar with this giallo genre, feels almost very giallo, even though it has that more police procedural element to it. And then we get another kind of hallmark of these types of movies, which we get big action scenes. There's a huge car chase. It's really, really great. It's probably the best part of the movie. And then we end with once things are revealed and we find out who's been funding these series of murders and who's behind this series of murders, we get this big kind of shootout scene, which is almost like a war movie. It's not even, this is what this has most in common with Switchblade Sisters, which is not a lot. These do not have a ton of connective tissue between these two movies I'm choosing to talk about, but they both do end with basically war sequences. Yeah, silent action, not a movie I knew what to expect at all, and not a movie that even in the immediate aftermath of watching it, that I was like 100% sold on, 100% like, oh, I love that movie. It's a good kind of, seems like very middle of the road, maybe entry into this subgenre of Italian police film. But then the great thing about Fractured Vision's Blu-ray release of this is the special features. I think they very, very, very often I will talk about, well, the movie's pretty good, but like the added context of the special features makes the disc more worth it or more better. But I think this is the hallmark case of that. This is one of those things where the features might be more of an appeal, at least to me they were, than the film itself, because this is there's a guy on here, and he produced almost all the special features. He did all the interviews, and then there's a longer doc on here. He talks to Martino. They talk outside because it's like COVID times. So if you ever wanted to see Sergio Martino in sunglasses and a jacket, just kind of standing around talking about movies, there's 18 minutes of that. He talks to Luke Merida, who's like, I'll put up a picture of him, but he looks like such a badass now as an older guy. And then the real meat of the features is this hour-long doc about the Years of Leeds, which is 55 minutes long. It feels and looks and is a real like history-heavy in the first half barely about films, but it does get to being about films and the different films that came out in this era. Just talking about the politics of what's going on in Italy at the time. And I would recommend this even if you're not interested in crime movies, even if you don't think you're that interested in this movie in particular. I would watch this just to get a better handle on like what's going on in the country around the time that a lot of these genre movies that we all enjoy from Italy, around the time they were produced, or slightly before. This is produced by Eugenio Ercolani, and he's one of the talking heads in the documentary, and he produced the other special features. But it really feels like he kind of spearheaded all of this stuff. I don't know what his relation is to Fractured Visions, but he just might be their go-to guy, or at least for now. I think this is their first release. But yeah, this is a movie that's a pretty good movie that to me it was like hugely elevated by the materials that they chose to include and the stuff that they chose to talk about in these special features. I found it fascinating. I don't know where you can get this in the US. I think your best bet is probably Diabolik DVD, our friends at Diabolik DVD, because they do imports. This is not Region B. This is a British disc, but this is not a region locked disc. This is a Region 0. I was able to play it no problem. I don't have a region free player, so I was able to watch it no problem. I really do recommend it. I think it's really great. So I'm not just being a shill because they sent it to me. I appreciate them sending it to me, but I really appreciated this set. I think it's really good, worth watching, especially if you enjoy Martino's films. If you're a Martino purist, if you got American Rickshaw, which is kind of the American version, American supernatural version of something like this. It's interesting to watch him work in different genres. He's just such a great kind of journeyman director, and the movie's really good. The car chase is fantastic, but the special features really elevate this and make it worth buying. This week's book recommendation, this is a little bit of an outlier again, because we're not talking about horror movies. I want to talk about a book called The Big Goodbye by an author named Sam Wasson. This is a nonfiction book, and I forget the exact subtitle, and I didn't write it down, but it is about it is ostensibly about Chinatown, about the movie Chinatown, but it's really about Hollywood in that era and how Chinatown represents maybe the last kind of movie of that type. So it's told in varying perspectives, or not perspectives, but varying focuses. So we focus on Jack Nicholson, we focus on Roman Polanski, we focus on the screenwriter Robert Towne, and we focus on producer Robert Evans. So you get all these different kind of portraits of these guys and their different relationships to each other and different relationships just in general. And it's an incredibly compelling book. It's not just for people who like the movie Chinatown, which is a great movie, but it's interesting in a wider context and what it tells you about how movies are made and how differently movies were made before Chinatown, how differently movies were made during Chinatown, and how wildly differently movies were made after Chinatown. And it's just this great, I wouldn't call it time capsule because it's not nostalgic at all. It doesn't sugarcoat. It doesn't have rose-tinted glasses when it comes to the real failings of a lot of the people involved in this. And it also doesn't feel like a hit piece. It doesn't feel like, oh, look at these scumbags. You know, it feels very sober, very clear-eyed in its dissection of how difficult it is to make a movie, how different a movie could be if one or two elements change. It's really, really fantastic. I know a good amount about the film and about the people involved in it. And it had barely had any kind of overlap with other books on the subject, with other books about the era. It's just really an interesting way to look at that era of filmmaking from the perspective of just one movie, and then kind of zooming out to encompass all the different lives of all the different people involved. It's a really, really good book. It's called The Big Goodbye. I really recommend reading it. All right. If you like this video, please hit like. If you really like this video, please subscribe and go check out my channel and go see other videos like it. I'm Adam Caesar. The book is Clown in the Cornfield, or Video Night, or Summer Job, or Exponential, or Zero Lives Remaining, or The First One You Expect, or Tribesman. Go read them. Go enjoy them. And I will see you next week, where we'll be back talking. Don't worry, we only took this little trip away from horror. We're gonna talk several horror movies next week, and you're going to really like it.